in survival mode. You're just avoiding conflict. It's almost like if I had to put you through Hillbrow at night, you're just going to walk, not freely, not
a negotiated space.
Yeah, you're almost half negotiating your life all the way. Then I got to vets. And only when I got to vets, man, I started to interact with black people.
Greetings to one and all. This is Dr. Tshepo Mvulane Moloi, postdoc research fellow, University of Johannesburg. Today, we are going to continue on our series on the founding schools of Johannesburg and part of the history that theme really leads us to. And because we came across some interesting individuals, particularly in as far as the context of blacks and education and the involvement of blacks in education in Johannesburg. We are basically continuing with tracking some of the individuals that are going to actually excavate and assist us to go back to the time when we were new to the private school spaces as black people in Johannesburg. And with that said, my guest today is Mr. Sonwabo Mtshazo. And he's going to join us today. And I'm just going to allow him now to just introduce himself briefly before we get into our conversation. Babusona, just a brief introduction. Who are you? And then we can get going.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Dr. Tshepo. I'm Sonwabo Mtshazo. I've lived in Johannesburg since 1970, although I was born in Durban, but I've always lived in Johannesburg. I live out in Midrand. I have a wife and 3 boys.
Right.
And I work as a project manager and quantity surveyor in the field of in the built environment.
Right. So just take us briefly. We're gonna go in depth in your schooling, but just briefly your academics. Where did you go to primary, high school, tertiary?
Yeah, I think I started my primary school in Vosloorus, in a primary school called Zimele.
This is the 70s?
Yeah, in 1973.
Okay.
And then we moved to Soweto as a family, because we lived out in Boksburg, Vosloorus. And then we moved to Johannesburg, where I studied my primary school at Diepkloof Zone 6. And then up until standard 3, then in standard 4, I moved across to St Stithians.
Okay, wait. The primary school, do you remember the name?
In Kwenkwezi.
In Kwenkwezi, Zone 6. Okay.
Zone 6.
Okay.
Yeah. And then higher primary, I went to Zone 1, Elite.
Okay.
And then in standard 4, I then went to St Stithians.
Right.
That was in 1979.
79, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where I then proceeded to go to high school and matriculate.
At St Stithians?
At St Stithians in 1985.
Okay. Tertiary?
Tertiary, I studied at VETS. I did a BSc in quantity surveying.
Okay. And then you went to work immediately?
And then I've been working since. I've been working and working.
Okay.
Various companies and on my own.
All right. So let's go back now to your because really our interest is your family and how, as the siblings, as black siblings who went to private school, during apartheid, 79. Just talk us a bit about how that decision came about in the family.
I think at that time it was driven largely by the disruption in the education system post-1976 in the townships. I think there was a lot of worry, a lot of families were moving their children outside the country, Swaziland and to Lesotho, And I think the private schools, and I'm not sure how that transformation took place in the country. But I think coming out of those concerns, some of the parents were starting to apply to these private schools. And I think, in 1978, there were a few people who then went in at Holy Rosary.
Okay, Holy Family.
Holy Family. And then I think from there, it was a family friend. They studied at Holy Family. And then the parents then spoke to my parents and they started to apply to other schools, and that's how we ended up at St Stithians.
So I'll tell you, according to my notes, my research notes tell me that the first black kids who went to private schools in Johannesburg was in 1977, and that was Sacred Heart College. Of course, this is just fresh out of the student uprising. But when I interviewed the principal, who was the principal at the time, Brother Neil McGurk, he says, when the first family walked into my office, and I gave them the forms, I didn't know I was breaking the law, because it was illegal for black kids to come to what would eventually become multiracial. At the time it was illegal, and I accepted them, and as Catholics, because Sacred Heart is part of the Maris Brothers, we took a position that no, we are going to be treating everybody equally. We're not going to follow the policy of apartheid and be coerced by the government. So anyway, 77. But I was just telling you that as just an overview, because that period, 77, 78, 79, would then see your sister, because your sister, so just for the record, you are the third born.
Yes.
In your sibling line.
Yes.
In a total siblings of four. Just mention your siblings from the firstborn.
It's Unomonde.
Okay.
Uteboho.
Right.
Then it's me. Then there's Usingisa.
Okay. And Unomonde is she went to St Mary's.
Yes.
And I want to, before we talk about your story, your impression on her having been the first black girl to go to St. Mary's, how was it like from, if you remember, in that period, from your side? What can you tell us about just your earliest memory about that?
I think it was new to all of us, certainly. So it was uncharted territory. There was a bit of anxiety and a bit of excitement. But at the same time that she was going to St. Mary's, we were getting into St. Stithians.
Right.
So it was across.
Right.
It was across for all of us.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
At the time that she was starting at St. Mary's, we were starting at St. Stithians with my brother.
Right.
Yeah. So, but certainly there was something new about it, and in a way, it almost forced us to behave differently from other kids in the township, because suddenly we were moving into different cycle in terms of schooling and holidays. So it alienated. So we almost found ourselves alienated from our township friends, and because of the holiday cycles.
Yes.
Because we were on the private school system, and everyone else was on the government school system.
Just for context, the entire four went to private schools in the same year, 1979.
Yes, certainly.
So Unomonde goes to St. Mary's, you and your and Tebuho go to St. Stithians, and then Uzingisa goes to Holy Family.
But she goes in 1978.
Oh, a year before. She had already started a year before.
At preschool.
Preschool.
Yeah, preschool.
Now, immediate question there is, hey, wasn't it expensive for your parents? I mean, this is 70.
Certainly it was. I mean, It was very expensive.
Yeah.
And they didn't hide it. I mean, they told us so, and we were aware that big sacrifices are being made. And we're never on bursaries or anything. So we just studied.
Because I think people will be curious. What were the professions of your parents at the time?
Yeah, my father is a doctor, a medical doctor.
Medical doctor.
Yeah, and I think he had graduated in the 60s, mid-60s.
At VET?
At Natal University.
Oh, University of Natal.
Hence we were born, hence the first three in the house were born in Natal.
KZN, okay.
And my mother is a nurse. She was a tutor at Baragwanath Nursing College.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she went on to be the principal of the college.
Okay. Just for the record, do you mind just telling us your parents' names so that Nabu Singabashi Napan? Ubaba.
Tamsanga, Ubaba.
Dr. Tamsanga Mtshazo. Okay.
And then Mama Ututuzile Mtshazo.
Tutuzile Mtshazo. Okay. All right. Now, you are living in Zone 6.
Zone 2.
Zone 2, Diepkloof.
Diepkloof.
And you are now private school kids, 79. Take us through. Firstly, what were you? Were you guys the first blacks to arrive at St Stithians or one of the first blacks?
There were three of us. It was me, my brother, and a friend called Tshepo Mvulane Moloi. There were three of us.
Okay.
So we arrived.
Is Tshepo still alive?
Yeah, Tshepo is still alive.
Okay, maybe we must also get to Tshepo.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, the three of you, okay?
Yeah, the three of us arrived.
Yeah.
In the prep school.
Right. What grades are you?
I'm on standard 4.
You are standard 4, your brother?
Standard 5.
Standard 5, and with Tshepo?
Standard 3.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Tshepo was in standard 3.
Okay.
And then my brother goes to high school in 1980, the following year.
Right.
I remain in the prep school, then I go 81, I start in the high school.
Right.
And so...
Okay. But how was it for you? Like, that first term or, just those early days at St. Stithians?
I think it was exceptionally challenging. It was difficult. One stood out, almost like a sore thumb. And the environment was, the people were friendly, but the environment was daunting.
Okay.
So it certainly was not exciting. Yeah, it certainly was not exciting. It was daunting. It was, and I think even for the white kids, it wasn't easy. It was new for them. They didn't know how to act and to react. They were acting as best as they can. And I think over the years, it almost changes as it becomes more common. But certainly at the beginning, it was daunting for us. And you get some people who make silly comments, some people who come out and be friendly. So it was a mixed bag, basically. It was a mixed bag.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking also the type of, were you participating in everything? The sports, the tours?
Certainly. The sports was compulsory, so we had to participate in sports. And there were camps, and certainly we did. There was a camp in Standard 5, I think, that everybody then went to. And we went to camp. We're in the Free State. All the way, I used to go to Golden Gate.
Okay.
The national park.
And how was I'm interested to know what sports you played.
In prep school, I did swimming. So swimming, I learned how to swim, and I swam in the summer. I did tennis, and then in the winter I did football.
Okay.
In prep school. And then when I got to high school...
When you say football, you're talking soccer?
Soccer, in prep school.
Oh, I didn't know St. Stithians had soccer.
In prep school.
Okay.
And then when you go to high school, it changes to rugby.
To rugby.
The soccer ends.
Right.
So soccer ends at prep school,
okay.
And then rugby comes in at high school.
Right.
Yeah.
So you played rugby?
I played rugby.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your highest team? that you represented the school?
No, I wasn't good at rugby at all.
Okay.
No, I wasn't good at rugby. I just played. Yeah, I played all the way up to high school, but I never represented the school at the highest levels.
And what about Tshepo no Tebugo?
Tshepo was very good at football. He represented the school well at soccer.
Okay.
He represented the school at soccer.
Right.
And then he certainly, when he got to high school, he stopped because there was no soccer in high school.
Oh, okay.
But Tshepo was very good. He played, I think, for the A team in soccer.
Okay.
And then Uteko was good at athletics.
Right.
Yeah, he represented the school at athletics.
Sprints?
Yeah, sprint.
Okay.
He used to sprint.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a sprinter.
When I wellness game.
No, I mean, I was just a participant.
Okay. And what was your house? Because I know
Mount Stevens.
Oh, okay.
I went to.
And did you enjoy that? Did you enjoy your house during those days?
In boarding school? Yeah, it was good. I was at boarding school. I was at Mount Stevens.
Yeah.
Certainly, it was good. I mean, you then got to interact intimately with other people, both younger and older, because in the school side, you tend to stick to your age group. But once you're in the boarding house, you then get to interact with your seniors and juniors. So that,
So you boarded?
Yeah, I went boarded.
You were boarded.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, that was lovely. Again, it just, the school fees scares me. 70s and all four of you are in private schools. It's hey, Abazali.
It wasn't easy.
Yeah. But I also think Mankulman Onunu, I got the impression that your parents were big on the church. So I think maybe some of the information would have come from that exposure with the song.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you now eventually also joined the high school, and how does that go for you? When you finished the primary and you entered the high school space.
High school, I suppose one was getting to be more mature, one was more familiar with the environment. And I mean, right through from prep school, right through to high school. And I remember when we wrote our matric, we were 117.
This is 85?
Yeah, 85. So we had been with the same class.
Right.
And I was the only black person in the group, right through.
Right.
Yeah, so from that point of view, I remained pretty much isolated.
Right.
But I had friends. I also had friends. But I never got to interact with another black person.
Right.
So I never quite. Whereas with my brother, they had one or two.
That joined?
Yeah, that joined.
Okay.
Yeah, some were coming from Sacred Heart.
Right.
And they were coming across. So you could interact.
Right.
Whereas with me, I was
Right.
all the way right through.
Right. I'm sure Tshepo some joined along.
Yeah, Tshepo, certainly some joined along the way. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I think I was the only one who then right through.
Okay. Yeah, that must have been.
Yeah.
But you get used to it in a very odd way.
Yeah, certainly. You adjust and you adapt.
Yeah.
And you figure out how to survive and how to manage and how to get by. I mean, in the end, it's a system.
Yeah.
And you get by in the system. You figure the things that you need to do, the things that you must avoid doing.
Right. So, because it was, St Stithians is it Anglican or Catholic?
It's
Methodist.
Methodist.
Right. So, the traditions, I'm thinking about the school traditions, none of those things you were uncomfortable with. You were fine with participating in all the rituals and...
you sort of like go on. You told yourself, this is where I'm at, I must get on with it.
Right.
Yeah, so in a way, I've tended to be a pragmatist. Just approach it in a pragmatic fashion and get through.
So, and this is interesting for me, there were no incidents. I'm not talking about the typical fighting as boys, but incidents where you would say, hey, okay, that was racist. But,
There were, no,
Did
there
you
were,
have any of those episodes?
there were more than plenty. No, certainly there were more than plenty.
Right.
And largely from other students.
Yes.
Some of the older students would make stupid comments. Some of your classmates or your fellow guys, they would once or twice they would make racial comments. But I think the school discouraged it a lot. So the school discouraged it. So it wasn't something that was open and blatant.
Subtle.
Yeah, it was subtle, but also someone would make it and they would know where to stop. They wouldn't want to. So they'll make a racist comment but stop.
Okay.
Just short of crossing the line. Short of crossing the line. And there was a lot of that.
Okay.
Yeah, so people would make you feel uncomfortable, but without going all the way.
Okay.
And using the K word, no, they would stop. It's just short. Yeah.
So you had a lot of those incidents. This is crazy. But again, it should, I mean, in the private school space, you would think maybe outside the school, not in the school.
Yeah, the school discouraged it, so it's not as... I don't think the school had outright rules. I think it was socially unacceptable. Right. So I think there was it was just socially unacceptable behavior. So even those that were doing it, they knew that they should not be doing it. Right. Yeah, so it was more moral persuasion rather than outright rules. Okay. So I guess being a church school, the church frowns upon such behavior. We have to treat each other with respect, right, etc. Right. So people knew how to push the boundaries without necessarily crossing. Okay.
And when you go home now, you only went home during holidays?
No, went home. So we're weekly boarders, but some of the weekends would be in, some of the weekends would go.
So when you talked with your brother, just your experiences, is there any particular incidents that stood out that you can say, one of those two or those three, those ones, they stand out?
You see, for me, a lot of the racism that was there was not necessarily direct. So people would speak about blacks in a derogatory fashion, right, but not necessarily speak to you right, in a derogatory fashion. So there was a lot of that. So people knew how to. Okay. I'm not speaking about you. I'm speaking about those. Right. Yeah. Yeah. You are different. Yeah. Those ones. Right. Yeah. So there are a lot of those. So so you're always having to. Yeah. You're always having to go on the guard. Right. You're always having to watch. And I think part of it, you also don't want to be too sensitive. So you also now keep yourself in watch. Okay. Yeah. So. Yeah, there'd be fights, but boys fight. So some of it would be half racial, half of it would be boys doing what boys are doing. Okay. Yeah. Because there were no girls at the time; it was all boys.
Yeah. Okay. Now, in my research, St Stithians was only started in 1941. It's interesting because you would assume it was older, much older. Yes. Given its grand stature, in our social spaces when we think education, private schools in Joburg. But it's late, 1941. So it's interesting that the Methodist Church of South Africa, that for me, I find it very interesting the Catholic education model, the Anglican education model, and the Methodist education model, because most of the private schools that we talk of fall under these three. Okay. So you can mention St. Mary's, that's Anglican, St. John's, Anglican, Sacred Heart, Catholic. So you can go and go. They will fall under one of these three. St. Martin's, Rossittenville, or St. Martin's Woodmead now, or St. Peter's, I think.
St. Peter's.
Same thing. They will fall under one of these three. But it is fascinating how they took a stand to go against the status quo. And it's fascinating now over the years how black government ministers, are sending their schools to private schools.
Like children.
Yeah, and yet they are now in charge of government education. So clearly something is not happening. What's your take on what should have changed when we came to power post-94 in terms of this model of private school and government school? Your opinion on it. And I mean, this is just your opinion. As one who lived in that era and are seeing the things that you're saying now.
Well, I suppose if you think about it, those private schools would have existed even before pre-democracy, I guess. Clearly, they serve a purpose, and they serve a need. And to me, it seems as though post-94, it's just gotten worse in terms of the need that they serve. So a lot of the things, for instance, public hospitals, if you take public hospitals, people used to go to public hospitals. Private hospitals are a new phenomenon. But today, everyone seems to want to flock to private hospitals. So there is more private services that people are consuming that government should be providing. So I think education is only but one of the victims of what has happened post-94. And I'm not sure what has been the major driver, without delving too much into the politics of it. People live in gated estates,
and that's on the rise.
Yeah, that's on the rise. So the big move to private universities are coming about now. So I guess education is only but one of many things that government should have sorted a long time ago, that it has shifted to the citizens, or the citizens have taken responsibility for themselves. And so it's difficult to say what could have been done. It looks like we're post what could have been done. Nothing was done, or what should have been done was not done. And I'm not sure whether it's an issue. I don't even want to guess whether it's an issue of resource, because it seems to cut across everything. So it's difficult to isolate.
No, my take on it is, because as Zuma speaks about sunrise clauses, we know about the sunset clauses, so she's reacting to the sunset clauses and says, if we were able to come out with the sunset clauses out of Kodesa, then what happened after 94, when we now were in power? Well, not after 94, after Mandela's first term, because we understand that first 5 years you couldn't expect too much. But why couldn't we come back to the table after Mandela's term of office, before President Mbeki would assume, and speak now about sunrise clauses? Because those are the clauses where the three things that are haunting us in this country would have been addressed. The land. Because it's now like it's a fashionable thing now. Everyone's jumping on the land. The economy. White monopoly capital, the banks, right? We should have addressed the issue of economics in the sunrise clauses. And then thirdly, the education system. We are still not in charge of the education system. We're in power politically, but we're not in charge of that system. And why do we still continue with two education systems in one country? Why do you have? We're one country. Why did after 94, did we not say, okay, we might need a 10-year graph, but in the end we need to have one system? Never happened. So the conversation never took place.
Certain.
Right? So we're still continuing on this binary, which it's telling about the leadership, because clearly the conversations that were supposed to be held in this and the planning and the forecasts have not happened.
Certainly. And it's even worse, I guess, when it even comes to even implementing the two systems, the parallel systems that we have. Even those are deteriorating.
Right.
So even, so it's not like we're getting better and good with two parallel systems. Those systems are half falling apart.
Okay, just so that, because we're wrapping up, let's go back to when you were at school, the St Stithians period. I'm curious, when you went back home to the hood and your friends and that environment, how are you guys taken or perceived, in the township? Because I'm thinking about your conversations and Banaba Model C or that kind of thing.
I think what starts to happen is that those that go to private schools start to coalesce.
Right.
So you almost just socialize in a bubble. You almost socialize in enclaves.
Right.
So you almost block out everybody as if they don't exist, and you just live in enclaves.
Okay.
And your life is just lived in an enclave.
Yeah.
So you know the other person who's in Mfuro, you go there.
Yeah.
You visit another one there. So your friends start to be those that are similar to
Right.
And that's what tended to happen.
Yeah.
And so the gap just increased and increased. But also I think what then started to happen is that more or less at that time, we then started to have new suburbs that were developing, your middle class kind of suburbs, where then people were coalescing around those. So,
extension.
Yeah, Tipuf Extension,
Orlando West.
Pimville, Selection Park. Yes. Yeah. So it was then you almost had that. So
I think Orlando West was Beverly Hills.
Yeah, Beverly Hills. Yeah. So you wouldn't have that big contrast because there was almost a social movement in that direction. So you didn't find yourself in a strange environment, so to speak.
So would you say when you left Zone 2 and you moved to Orlando West, would you say the home environment or the neighborhood was better, or it was typically the same in terms of the developments and changes, relations with your peers, the socialization?
So you almost immediately stop socializing. You start to socialize. So in other words, people that I would have been friends with on a day-to-day, I just see them pass and I wave and I talk. But my friends then tend to be people who are in Rockville or who are in wherever else.
Go to the same school.
Even other schools. So you start to befriend other kids in other private schools.
Right.
So I would start to know people in Attridgeville. I would know people in Tembisa. So I then start to move.
Right.
So my circle, in terms of geographic circle, becomes bigger.
Okay.
But I'm socializing in the enclaves. Little enclaves.
But
little pockets.
I remember talking to Nunu, and she was telling me she brought her two or three white friends home. How was that incident for you?
I guess. No, I remember it.
Yeah.
Everybody was excited and surprised, and even for them, for the white kids, it had an element of excitement. People were excited about it.
This is 1980, no?
Yeah, probably 1980, 81.
Okay.
Later than that. Yeah, so people are excited, and I guess we were almost like pioneers, and you are treated as pioneers as such. So we are almost like trendsetters, and we are seen as such. So there was no hostility. People were always friendly and good.
But when you and your brother, you never brought Amachita home?
I did. Kids. I think we did. I did it, but around about 82, 83, yeah.
Okay.
I brought one or two friends as well. But like I said, because you are moving between other kids who go to private schools,
it was a normal.
Yeah, it was almost a norm.
It wasn't a big deal.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal as such. I mean, looking back.
Yeah. Though it was, I mean,
yes,
right. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
And I guess things that happen today that may go on to define the future in a different way. They're never.
Yeah.
I don't know how to put it. They always start off small.
Right.
And so nobody sees the big moment for what it is.
Right.
It always starts small and later snowballs into a big moment.
Right. Okay. As we wrap up, what message or parting shot would you say you want to leave us with as we continue on this history or on-field research of the archive of Black kids, in Johannesburg, in education, from your experience? Like the one defining thing that you can say, this is one of the things that I wouldn't want you to miss when you do your final analysis.
I guess my take is slightly different in that, over the years, the one thing that one gets to, I think education was a problem for our grandparents.
Okay.
Yeah, our grandparents were not educated. And so they then thought if they're educated, they could then make a difference in their lives. They could then have the things that they didn't have.
Right.
They could then understand the things that they didn't understand. And so they then, I guess, emphasized it on their children to say, you need to be educated. So whether they were educated or not, but they knew that they had to be educated.
Right.
Because their grandparents knew that the problem is education.
Right.
And I think, having been to St Stithians, and I reflect and I realize that probably what keeps St Stithians and those places the way they are, they're as prestigious as they are, is the one area that, in focusing on education, we're almost taking our eyes off, which is capital.
Right.
And I think education and capital tend to go very close to each other. In other words, those that are educated tend to be close to the ones with capital.
Right.
Well, basically the ones with capital need the ones that have got the education.
Right.
To maintain their capital. And so education on its own does not quite liberate you. It gives you the basis to know that you need to be liberated. But the real liberator is capital.
Right.
So until we start to transgress and sort out the capital issue, the impact of education will always be minimal. So in other words, it is how we think about things, but most importantly, how do we fund things? And funding is the big problem. And we can't fund things unless we have capital. So my sense is that somewhere we need to start to talk about the capital and how to address the capital issue. Where do we find the money? And hopefully those that are in education can start to relate, because and I'm not sure whether it can evolve from education to capital. I'm not sure whether it can happen, or whether capital has a different way of coming about. So for me, the issue of education lies there. My interest is, are we not looking at the wrong thing?
Okay. Well, I will take that as your parting shot, but if I had to comment on that. Systems theory. So anything that we do must be systematic if we want to progress.
Sure.
As long as we're dealing with silos, we are not actually going to address the system.
True.
So our biggest challenge now is, how do we actually rethink the system we're in, which is a capitalistic reality.
Sure.
It doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in Africa, abroad, it dictates is capitalism. So if we look at the model of China with communism and how they actually engaged their understanding of socialism, and we look at how the rest of Europe would adopt their own model of capitalism, and how today the richest currencies, you're talking about the pound, you're talking about the euro, and then you talk about the dollar, which is the international currency for trade. So, who decided those rules? Who made the dollar the international currency? Why can't we say, no, the rand is the international currency? It brings us back to power. So, you are never going to address the system for as long as you don't have power. And so, all the beautiful ideas we can have and we can recommend and suggest, they are nothing but poems.
Sure.
Because we have no power. So we need to start thinking seriously about the idea of power, which we are not doing. We are doing everything else, but the thing that will actually allow us to engage at that level, and that's why the Ukraine-Russia conflict right now is very fascinating, because this is for the first time showing you the muscle that Russia has globally. Because we're meant to believe that the US is a hegemon. It's the super power post the Cold War. But here's Russia showing you that they lost the Cold War. But why can't you touch them? You see, they still have that power.
Yes.
They can't move to Russia the way they would like, the way they do with all other nations. So this is what we need to look at this conflict, but look at it for our terms as well, to say, okay, so this is how we need to be moving. And unfortunately for us, we are 40 years, 50 years behind schedule.
Sure.
So and you think about your black graduates who graduate, who are your top thinkers today, whether they come from a Harvard, or they come from a UCT, or they come from a Pretoria University or Wits. Those are not the kind of black graduates who are grounded in South Africa. Their interest is elsewhere. Here is just an address, this is where family is, but their interest is not here. So with that said, anyway, that was just my 2 cents on that. But thank you very much. I think this is a nice continuity to the series that we are doing on education and blacks in education in South Africa. And we look forward to more engagements.
No, thanks a lot. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, thanks.
One question. It's a bit of a sidebar that I would like to ask. I went through something similar to you in terms of the situation at school, where I was the only black child going up all the way from primary school, grade 1 or grade 0, up until I began high school. That's when I was exposed to other black guys in my...
But tell him what school was that? What?
That was in Tridwin in Rosebank.
Yeah, okay.
So, with that experience, I actually went through a lot of what you touched on several occasions. It seemed like a running sort of a theme. The isolation. How did you cope with that isolation that you tend to find yourself in, where you're always in two worlds and always trying to navigate two worlds, and it's something it's impossible for a child to marry those two together effectively, but you just try to exist and maintain in those spaces. For me, I spent a lot of time by myself, reading a lot of books. What did you do to help yourself go through those periods where there's you're on your own?
And I totally sympathize and empathize with you and understand exactly what you're talking about. And for me, the big breakthrough comes when I go to Wits. When I get to Wits, only then can I start to almost look back at my life and think about those kind of things, because in a way you go through it, you're almost in a, what's the word? You're almost, not a zombie, like, but you're almost in a haze. You're just in survival mode. You're just avoiding conflict. It's almost like if I had to put you through Hillbrow at night, you're just going to walk, not freely, not
a negotiated space.
Yeah, you're almost half negotiating your life all the way. Then I got to vets. And only when I got to vets, man, I started to interact with black people.
In a scholarly environment.
Yeah, but it was liberating. It was.
Yeah.
You know, I got there and all I could do was just sit and interact every day and just get to understand almost, and in a way it helped me to understand who I am. You know, in understanding others, I just got to start to understand myself. Because then I got to meet different people and I could interact on an ongoing basis. And some were poor, some were not poor. But certainly they all had ambitions and goals. And you almost got a different picture of a black person than I'd had when I was at St Stithians.
Right.
You know, at St Stithians you almost had to move from, first of all, you had to be an acceptable black person.
Right.
But even then, you have to show that you have to be excellent.
Right.
You have to excel, you've got to be ahead.
Right.
But suddenly when I got to vets, I realized that no, I can be myself, whatever myself is.
Yeah.
You know, whatever myself is, it doesn't matter whether...
Those are your rebellious years.
Yeah, whether I'm excellent or not. In the end,
I
must be comfortable with who I am and what I do.
Right.
And so I then stopped chasing to be big, to be something. With the St Stithians, I was almost under pressure to say, what are you going to be? What are you going to do? You know?
You're carrying the flag.
You almost carry
the flag. You represent the badge.
In my case, I would see the names of the guys who were there and say, I need to leave my name also, somehow. And even the way you might not be able, you beat yourself up for not also being able to put your name up there with the others.
Exactly.
Because if you're standing out physically, you also want to stand out there as well.
Exactly. You know? Yeah, and I think really going to vets to me was an absolute liberation moment. It just freed my mind.
Yeah.
You know.
Because those were the days of Talimpofu. We had the Black Student Association.
Yeah.
Right.
With Abu Dhabi and we interacted.
Yeah.
And they are really, really interesting, I think. But you almost have, you're almost negotiating your way through, almost negotiating without really being yourself.
Right.
You almost are not yourself. And it's only later that you discover yourself to say, no, man, there's the me, there's things that I like and things that I don't like. And in a way, I think it has, it also turned me into a pragmatist in the sense that I can navigate difficult spaces.
Okay.
But that comes from those days where I had to navigate the difficult spaces of St Stithians.
Okay.
And it's made me just a pragmatic person.
The tool set. That's the tool set.
Yes. To the extent that you never blame anybody.
Okay.
For anything, you sort of like accept that I need to be able to react appropriately for myself in this environment.
Okay.
So you're never a victim.
Right.
Because if I'd had a victim mentality, I would have been the victim of St Stithians.
Right.
I would have been the victim because you're the odd one. It would have been traumatic.
Right.
But you then see it for what it is, that it was difficult space. Later on things change. I have the power and the ability to do whatever I like. And I must pursue what I like.
Okay.
So now, with that kind of realization coming later in life, is it something that you think that other people would have recognized earlier? That liberation, that freedom to say, look, I can really just be myself. I don't really have to keep on trying to play a role, keep on trying to do so and so. I sometimes feel like people come across that moment a lot sooner than if you're in the mode where you're always trying to carefully navigate different spaces.
I think most people, my sense is that those that come across it sooner tend to get ahead very quickly. Those who come across it late tend to find themselves, and I don't want to say making mistakes in later years, but almost pursuing the wrong things in later years. It's almost... So in other words, what I'm saying, those who tend to realize that sooner, you find that they actually get pretty much ahead because they know exactly what they're about and that who they are is what they're about.
They're not going to spend 3 or 4 or 5 years wasting time spinning the wheels before you actually, that's the part.
Yeah. So it helps when you can find it but most people then don't find it. Most people then get told that you must chase that, you must have a Range Rover, you must have a beautiful watch, then you are chasing the material things, you are off the mark completely.
Almost like you're trying to compete with what it is that whiteness represents at the time.
Exactly.
Or attain something for yourself so
that makes you look status. Yeah, so you can have the status. And that's why I always say, the worst thing you can ever want is one status. It's the worst, and I think the worst thing you can ever chase is status. Because then you are never yourself. You are almost living to how you think others are perceiving. Dignity and status are probably the most difficult and most painful things to chase.
Yeah.
Because you are then always externally, you are living according to how you think that you are being perceived. So even your actions, the things that you do, you are always thinking, geez, I need to do this. Yeah, it's always distorted. Always distorted.
Fabulous answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.